What is going on, guys? It's the Mad Dragon. We're back. We're doing another preview video for the Autumn Nations. Round 3, Week 4, whatever you want to call it. There's two different versions. Oh, we've already done a bunch of preview videos on the channel getting ready for this week's rugby, so make sure you do check them out after this one. And if you enjoy this style of video, make sure to subscribe to the channel. So this one is going to be about Scotland versus Argentina. This is probably one of the more anticipated games of the weekend. Looking forward to see where both teams are at. Now, let's talk about Scotland first of all. Scotland last week, of course, had that game against New Zealand where they sort of got run over for 10 minutes and then they really stepped up a gear. They looked extremely good. We saw them coming back, the scoreline getting closer. It looked like Scotland could potentially actually win that game, but eventually New Zealand found those gaps just enough to steal that game away from Scotland. Now, there was a lot of positives from the Scottish perspective to see the improvements made. Some players really stepping out for them. Chris Harris, Duhan van der Merwe. A lot of players really beginning to step up and make a huge impact on that game. But it's just being able to finish it out. We talked in the report of that game, you know, how close they got repeatedly to scoring more points and just not getting over that try line, not getting that ball down, not taking the 3 points, just getting that final 5% correct, and that scoreline could have been totally different. Now, going into this week then, Scotland have made a few changes. They've had a few injury knocks, which we did sort of hear about during the week about what happened. They've lost people like Richie Gray now, took a bit of a knock. I think Watson's also had a bit of an injury as well. So a few mixes up to talk about going over this team. So starting out in this front row, we have Schoeman, Brown and Fagerson. This was the starting front three that led the way last week. The Scottish scrum was looking good. The maul was looking pretty good. It was just being able to arrange it into tries. They potentially struggled with a little bit. But Fraser Brown, nice to see him back in the Scotland jersey and playing well last week. So nice to see him still in there. In the lock department, Johnny Gray comes in over his brother Richie, of course, with that little knock. And Grant Gilchrist still there as vice captain 1 or 2. I'm not really sure if they have an order for their vice captains. I know they have 2, but I'm not sure if there's VC1 or VC2. In the back row, Matt Fagerson goes in at 6. Jamie Ritchie goes to 7. And Jack Dempsey over in 8. So a bit of a switch around here. Now, Jack Dempsey made a nice impact into the game last week. It was a bit of a shame for him that he did pick up his yellow card during the game. But apart from that, I actually thought he played pretty well. So some weird switch-ups here. I don't know if I've ever actually seen Jamie Ritchie play at 7. Matt Fagerson, of course, going to be running ball in hand a lot of the time, so at that number 6 shirt. So we'll have to see how this back three gets on. I think I prefer seeing Watson, but obviously with an injury, can't do that. They'll make the most of this. I feel like that's a bit more of an attacking back row rather than sort of when we thought about technical breakdown, Jacklers sort of getting over it. Matt Fagerson still having to get over the ball along with Jack Dempsey, but I think Watson might be a bit of a blow for them there. In the halfback partnership, Ali Price stays alongside Finn Russell. A lot of people are very excited to see Finn Russell back. We saw some cheeky little kicks from him, as we like to do, some real on-the-edge passes. But I did think Ben White, again, I thought Ben White came on, made a nice little impact. Maybe Argentina is not the right team to make him start against. I think Ali Price got a good head on his shoulders for this game, so maybe it would have been the right to stay there. In the centre partnership, no switch-up. Sione Tuipulotu stays alongside Chris Harris as the other vice-captain this week. I think he actually was the vice-captain last week as well, so holding it out well. The defensive game from him really good last week. Again, I just think he's doing so well recently. He's really organising the Scotland defence, and it held out for so much of the game. It was just towards the end when people started getting a bit tired and it got a little bit more sporadic. You began to see those errors coming, but when they had their defensive line set up, they looked really good. And then in the back three, Duhan van der Merwe, Darcy Graham and Stuart Hogg all playing pretty well. Stuart Hogg had a bit of an early mistake. There was a weird irony that he had that little interview before the game where he said, "Judge me on my rugby, not on my looks," and the first touch of the ball he had was a foul. So we probably want to forget about that one. But ultimately throughout the rest of the game, I thought Darcy Graham and Duhan van der Merwe, I thought played really well. Duhan van der Merwe carrying the ball very well. Darcy Graham nearly getting a try in that corner. Such a shame he didn't get there. So a few switches to the Scotland team, but overall, I think this is a good 1-15. In the replacements then, George Turner comes in alongside of Jamie Batty and Murphy Walker. So this is an entirely different front row from what we saw against New Zealand. You know, I maybe would have thought, you know, Ewan Ashman, Rory Sutherland, WP Nell played last week. Definitely better. I think Ewan Ashman has actually picked up a knock as well. So that probably ruled him out. Jamie Batty and Murphy Walker. We'll see how they get on. We know Argentina like to attack the scrum, but we did see Argentina last week against Wales, not necessarily dominating sort of those areas, so maybe they'll be okay there. In the rest of the replacement forwards, then Glenn Young alongside of Andy Christie, and the replacement backs of Ben White, Blair Kinghorn, and Cameron Redpath. Someone we're looking forward to see have a bit more time on the pitch. We really still haven't got to see him in this Scottish international team for any great length of time. That's some nice coverage in that backfield, because of course Blair Kinghorn, your fullback, fly half, you want it to be, also winger, Cameron Redpath in your centre. I think Chris Harris is probably more versatile at being able to switch between 12 and 13. When I think of Cameron Redpath, I would chuck a bit inside centre, so I imagine he'll come on for Tui Pelotu. I imagine Chris Harris will want to stay on for the full 80 in that one. So 5-3 split, always potentially a bit of a risk going against Argentina with the way they like to play with their big forward pack. But the way Argentina have developed over the last sort of 18 months with how good their backs have been, maybe you want to be able to have that expansive, wider sort of defensive style. So I don't necessarily think it's a bad move. On to Argentina then, who last week played Wales, came away with a loss. And we sort of went over that in the match report. You can go check that one out after this if you want to. But Argentina, to me, took a bit of a step backwards in that game. They really sort of stepped away from what they were becoming extremely good at. Now, when we've seen them over the Rugby Championship and in games already so far during the summer tour, okay, so the discipline hasn't necessarily been the best. In some games, there's certain penalties they just need to remove themselves from. But the way they played the game was working so well for them. They really backed their own defence. The speed off the line was extremely good. The tackle rate's good. The missed tackle rate is incredibly low. They're just taking the 3 points every opportunity. Boffelli's boot is an incredibly high percentage at the minute. He's taking those 3 points. They're seeing out the game based on other teams' mistakes and the fact their own defence is winning every single battle in that breakdown zone and just getting jackal penalties, stealing, and then occasionally you just launch your backs and they've got the speed to go over. Playing Wales, they just didn't do that. They just sort of shifted it up. They went to a bit more of an old style. They were just trying to force the game. They were turning down the post. They were trying to kick to corner, going for the driving more, which wasn't really working. The defence had a few more holes in it. Wales didn't score like that many tries to sort of show off the defensive side of Argentina lacking, but there was just the game style and the game management wasn't there for me. So going into this week, I want to see a bit of a different style from Argentina. I want to see them go back to what they were doing so well against the other teams in the Rugby Championship. In terms of the team then, a couple of switches to talk about. So in the front row, Thomas Gallo goes on alongside Julian Montoya, who we didn't get to see last week. Had a little niggle before he actually got onto the pitch, so didn't actually get to play in that game. Might have been a big area as to why the Argentinian Jackals weren't coming in quite so freely last game. And then finally, Bello comes in over Gomez Cordella, who played last week. In the lock department, Alemano and Lavanini. We're probably never going to say any different names. Those boys are always there. They're doing good work. I mean, the line out is one area in Argentina that I'm feeling quite confident in. They scored a high percentage considering how many lineouts there were last week actually against Wales. In the back row, Gonzalez, Kramer and Matera. Again, no switch up here. We know what these boys bring, all of which playing well. Kramer came off quite early last week. I would have liked to see him stay on a little bit. I think his defensive work is very good at the minute. I would like to see him stay on for a little bit longer in games. In the halfback partnership, Bertrano alongside of Carreras. Carreras had a couple of issues last week. Probably the first game I've seen from him where the things just not quite going his way, a few mistakes, things not working how you want to, which I think maybe the team's even looking at. We'll get onto that a little bit later. In the centre partnership, De La Fuente comes in alongside Orlando this week over the likes of Moroni. Maybe not impressing, not doing enough in the game. Orlando offers a slightly different angle. So we did see him actually in a couple of games in the Rugby Championship that Orlando is a great player at just making huge line breaks and making defences incredibly worried. So I think that's a good move to have him in. And then finally in the back three, Boffelli, who just didn't get his kicking underway last week. We wasn't allowed to. Del Gui comes in instead of Carreras on the right wing, and Juan Cruz Malia holds out in that fullback position, who did actually play well. I quite like Malia. I think he's playing well at the minute. So a few switches to talk about there in the Argentina team. Hopefully they're being made for the right decisions. Maybe people not impressing last week, making the switch, make sure the team stays at the top level. In terms of the replacements then, we have Ruiz, Tetas, Chaparro and Medrano. This is probably the first time I've ever seen this graphic where all the names are in a stack as opposed to alongside, because everyone's got such long names over in Argentina. In terms of the rest of the replacement forwards then, we have Lucas Paulos and Issa. In the replacement backs, then, we have Bezan Velez. Not a name I know there, but the return of a name that I do know very well. Nicolas Sanchez comes back into this team. Not getting the start. I think this is probably a good move. Coming back, he obviously had a big injury, a little bit of a wow back, so he's coming back into this side. I think it's probably right to keep Carreras on for a bit. I'm sure we will see Sanchez come on a little bit later in that game. He's a bit of a veteran now for that Argentina team. High caps, high points, always going to be kicking towards the post as well. I wonder who will take over kicking duties actually out of Boffelli and Sanchez. If Boffelli's kicking well, I don't like it when teams take it away. I'd probably keep Boffelli kicking. And then finally, Matias Moroni on that bench there as well, just to bring a bit of pace on later in the game. So overall, a good Argentina team. Certainly a lot of experience, a lot of team chemistry now. A lot of these names you'll have been seeing week in, week out. So I think these lads are looking good together. So I think this is a good Argentina team to face Scotland. So in terms of score prediction, what do we think for this one? What do we actually think for this one now? Now, Scotland played very well against New Zealand. Argentina didn't really play that well against Wales. Discipline for Scotland hasn't been great, and Argentina have been normally pretty good at just taking the 3 points as soon as they get a penalty. So if Scotland keep their discipline under control, you feel like Argentina actually might struggle to get going in this. But at the same time, one of the areas that felt like New Zealand were doing pretty well last week was if you just go for the relentless attack over and over and over again, pick up the ball, carry and carry and carry, that is where we began to see the Scotland line beginning to break a little bit, and those carry meters for New Zealand towards the end of the game came in well. And Argentina are also very capable of doing the exact same thing. So, oh man, this is tough. I think I'm going to go for Argentina. I've got a feeling a lot of people will go for Scotland in the Super Brew, but I'm going to go for Argentina, but not by a lot. I'm going to say Argentina by 2. I'm going to say 1 or 2 points. I think it'll be really close. I've got a feeling the coaching staff will have looked at that Wales game. They'll be desperate to make that Argentina team improve to what they can be. And we'll have to see what Scotland come up with. But of course, guys, make sure you do drop down in the comments your thoughts on the game, your thoughts on the team selection, and finally, your score predictions. Make sure they are going onto the Super Brew for us to look at on Monday's video when we check out the world rankings as well. If you have enjoyed this video today, guys, remember to leave it a like, and to keep up to date with all the latest videos as they come out, remember to subscribe to the channel. I'll see you all next time, guys. Bye-bye.